For the first time in about 5 months, Saber Interactive, who have just come off of the back of an extremely successful release with Space Marine 2, have somewhat acknowledged the Knights of the Old Republic game they have in development. And there is a reason I'm not saying remake, and that is what I want to talk about in today's video. Because many months ago in a previous video, I speculated that something may have changed with the KOTOR Remake. Now, if you have followed this game as intensely as I have, with all of the press releases and all of the little bits of news to come out, it was always odd to me that they never actually said the game's title. For example, the CEO of Saber refused to say Knights of the Old Republic Remake in a recent interview. Everybody at Embracer, before Saber was sold, refused to actually say the game's name, and I found this really weird. Now, of course, it could have meant anything, however, today's update reinforced to me that something isn't quite right, and maybe it's possible that things have changed, whether it's in a small way or perhaps a massive way. So, in good news for Saber Interactive, and possibly for the Knights of the Old Republic game, the studio received a heavy investment from 2 private equity firms, which are not only going to help the company clear off its debt to Embracer after buying itself out, but it will help with the ongoing development of Saber Interactive's upcoming game releases. And in a press release where they announced this investment, Saber and the 2 equity firms explicitly gave a list of all of the major upcoming games that Saber are working on that they've already announced. And this list starts with StarWars Knights of the Old Republic, then it goes on to say Jurassic Park Survival, John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead, and a couple more. But when you read that, do you notice something odd? They have only written StarWars Knights of the Old Republic. They have omitted the word remake. And you might say, well, Luke, maybe they just forgot it, or it's not that serious. However, every other one of those games has its title in full. For example, it's not Jurassic Park or A Quiet Place, it's Jurassic Park Survival, Quiet Place, The Road Ahead. And for some reason, the Knights of the Old Republic Remake is missing a part of its originally announced title, unlike the rest of the games on this list. And for me, with everything else, this just reinforces that something has changed. And just to add a little bit more fuel to this fire on why I think so, have you also noticed that Saber haven't got this game anywhere on their social media or their website? They're willingly stating in a press report like this that the StarWars Knights of the Old Republic game is an upcoming game, and yet if you go on their website, they're not saying anything about it. They have these other games mentioned, like Jurassic Park Survival and A Quiet Place, yet they don't mention the KOTOR Remake anywhere. And let's be honest, Star Wars is the biggest license they will ever work on as a studio. So to not make that very clear is a little bit odd. Now, of course, Games Workshop are pretty big, as is Jurassic Park, but it really doesn't come anywhere close to the scale of Star Wars in terms of IP. So, to put this into perspective, in an official press release in regard to their upcoming games, they're not calling it the Knights of the Old Republic Remake, they're calling it Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Their social media completely omits the game, as does its website, and whenever anybody talks about it, they refuse to actually say the game's name. Now, I don't think this is coincidence, but what could it possibly mean? So the simplest answer is the game is getting a name change, and it is still going to be a remake. There are remakes out there that have the full title and end it with remake, for example the Final Fantasy VII remake, but then you also have remakes like Resident Evil and Dead Space which don't have remake in the title at all, it's just Resident Evil 2 or Dead Space. So maybe Saber have decided they don't want to call it the Knights of the Old Republic Remake, and perhaps it will just be called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. However, there are also other possibilities. We haven't heard a word about this game in 3 years, and despite the fact that I know Saber took everything from Aspire, which was a considerable amount of work by the way, and when I say considerable, they had entire levels and environments, they had many of the models, they had entire voiceover sessions done, they had mocap, hell they were even writing languages for all of the aliens, so there was a phonetic consistency across the game. And while the remake at Aspire was still a way away, it was heavy into development, and so Saber got a lot of stuff they could use when they took over. And so to then take 4, maybe 5, maybe even 6 years to then ship the game out after all of that stuff they already got, it makes you wonder, maybe they haven't been working on it in terms of full development. I mean, I'm still of the belief that the team that made Space Marine are probably the team that are going to go into active development on the Knights of the Old Republic game, but again, don't take my word for it, that's just my opinion. But it is possible that this game is getting changed in some way. There are a lot of people out there that weren't overly keen on a remake in the first place. Some people just wanted a remaster, and funnily enough, Saber are a studio that have worked on remasters. So have Saber decided, you know what, we're now in full control of this, we're just gonna make a remaster. It would be much easier to do, it wouldn't be as complex as a remake. Or are they maybe saying this is gonna be their magnum opus and they're gonna go make a full-on reboot? I don't know, it really is just a mystery at this point. However, I think the fact that Saber have chosen to omit the word remake is very indicative that something has changed with the game, whether it is just the title or something bigger remains to be seen. In truth, it could be possible that they're just planning to re-announce the game with a new title that removes all of the Sony branding and the Embracer branding and the Aspire branding and so on and so forth, and then they can have that on their website and social media pages for when they do. This would then make sense as to why they don't really want to talk about it just yet or have any of the original announcements plastered over their social spaces, but I certainly thought this was interesting and worth at least talking about with you guys, because I know there's a lot of you that would still prefer a remaster to a remake. In fact, I see it regularly in my comments and all over my social media, so maybe this is a good sign for you guys? Who knows? But with the very successful release of Space Marine, I do think we're probably going to hear something within the next year. I'm not holding on to hope that we'll hear anything in the next 3 months, so I don't expect it to show up at the Game Awards or anything like that. But I do think we will likely hear something in 2025, because if the Space Marine team are moving on to active development of the game in the next few months, as I personally think they will be, you're talking a late 2025 or 2026 release. Now, something a little bit unrelated, some of you might not be aware, but they're actually releasing a lot of KOTOR merchandise recently. For example, we've got a Darth Nihilus, Traya and Scion Funko Pop collection. We also have a HK-47 Funko and a T3M4 Funko. Then there's the Revan Hot Toy that's coming out next year, which looks pretty goddamn awesome, by the way. There's also Revan helmets and Revan costumes being released, so if you're not aware of them, you are now. And talking of KOTOR merch, I don't usually do this, but I have some pretty cool KOTOR inspired merch on my channel that I think a lot of you would like, so perhaps consider checking it out. But I do want to know from you, what do you think about all of this? Do you think this could be Saber just dropping the word remake from the title, or do you think it might be a more significant change? Let me know down in the comment section below, because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal, and perhaps share it with your friends. And if you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing to keep up with everything Knights of the Old Republic. And if you want some more awesome KOTOR content, you should check this video out. It's a deep dive into why Darth Nihilus and Darth Scion didn't kill Kreia before Knights of the Old Republic 2. I'll see you there.